that from the highest blues to the lowest symphony of the black experience, any of us could have been in that situation. Any of us could have been in that situation. You dig what I'm saying? And because any of us could have been in that situation, it's necessary that we use our imaginations to exercise empathy and try to figure out, I wonder what it would have been like to be in that type of situation. I wonder what those people had to go through, so on and so forth, because that could have been me. That could have been my group. That could have been my race. That could have been people that I resonate with. Those could have been my ancestors, so on and so forth. So we'll jump right into it. One of the key ideas that we want to really focus in on is what inspires legacy, culture, and behavior. What inspires legacy, culture, and behavior? That's the key thought that I want to keep in your mind, all right? And it's a question that I want you to ask, it's a question I want you to play around with when we talk about Rick Ross. And then as we start getting into you as yourself, I want you to ask that question, what inspires my legacy, culture, and behavior? As we start talking about the team, other members of the team, I want you to ask the question, what inspires legacy, culture, and behavior? It's an important question to ask to help us refrain from judging and kind of defining people without their permission. So what inspires legacy, culture, and behavior? We'll jump to Rick Ross. How many people know Rick Ross? All right, everybody knows Rick Ross, the rapper, correct? Rick Ross, okay, Rick Ross is a rapper, but he's also an actual human being. He was a drug lord that was getting busy in the early 80s and the early 90s, Rick Ross, right? So what we're gonna do is, I'll tell the story about Rick Ross. I'm gonna start in the middle, right? Then I'm gonna go back to his origin story, and then I'm going to fast forward from the middle to the end of the story. So I'm going to it's a weird way I'm going to attack this story. But Rick Ross was at the peak of his powers in the 80s, doing stupid numbers, especially for that time, right? To put it in perspective, Magic Johnson came into the league when? Anybody know when Magic Johnson came into the league? Remember, take a crack at it? 70, no, not that early. I think it's like 79. 79, right? So Magic Johnson comes into the league in 79. He signs a lifetime contract, $20 million for 20 years. That sounds like chump change now, right? Bums get that in the NBA. Role players get that in the NBA easy. But at that time, $20 million for 20 years, a lifetime contract, it's big money. It's long paper, right? Rick Ross said, he making that, he can make just $1 million a year? I do that in a day. Sometimes I triple that, just to give you some perspective of how much money. So you can do the numbers. 1 million times 365, and some of those days he getting 2 million, maybe 3 million. That's some heavy, that's a lot of bread. So Rick Ross was the man. During the 80s, during the crack era, when crack wasn't looked at how it's looked at now. Crack then was kind of under the radar to some degree, right? It was a recreation thing. It was a recreation drug. And so we go back to Rick Ross's origin story. What inspires Rick Ross's behavior to even get in the drug game, right? So how many of you ever heard of the Black Panther Party? Black Panther Party? All right. Some of you will probably think that the Black Panther Party was this ruthless, militant group of black people. They were not. It was actually a protection program, right? There was a law in the 60s that said is you could walk down, this was in Sacramento, California, you could walk down the street with a gun as long as you didn't have a felony, right? Now, we can keep it 100 with you. That rule was probably for white folks, probably not for black folks, right? There was a time when there was a decriminalization era where they were trying to find ways to get slaves and get black people to decriminalize them, right, and put them in jail. So rightfully so, they wanted to have weapons on the hip, weapons on site to kind of keep black folks in check. Well, some of these black folks started getting hip and said, wait a minute, I know this rule, I know this policy. As long as I don't have a felony, I can hold a firearm too. So in the era where black people were getting beat down by cops, were getting shot by cops, so on and so forth, a lot of the same things that are happening now were happening then. the Black Panther Party said, we're going to create a protection program. And one of the things that we do, we're going to protect people in our community. So if we know that this brother has not done anything wrong, his brother may not know his rights, but we know our rights. We know the law. So what we're going to do is we're going to protect them. Also, with this protection program or this Black Panther Party program, what we're going to do is we're going to feed our community. We're going to have breakfast programs for the kids to make sure that these kids get a good breakfast before they go to school so they can perform better academically. We also want to make sure that we have simple needs to serve it, to make sure that our community is healthy. You know, you go to the hospital for certain little things, you might have to pay a couple dollars. Well, everybody ain't got that. Well, they said, well, listen, we can raise the funds, and we can make sure that if you have to get your shots or flu shots or something like that, we'll take care of you. Now, the Black Panther had it's like a 10-point or 10 request manifesto of things that they needed in order to feel like they were given a fair chance in America, right? And so that was their origin. That's what they were about, protecting their community, providing for their community. They weren't about just gun violence, being militant, and going after the establishment, right? But what happened was the Black Panther slowly but surely became the most feared group in America. The most feared group in America, right? And so because of that, you had government officials, you have the FBI plotting against the Black Panther Party. Slowly but surely, you start seeing some of these leaders die off. You start seeing them go to jail. Families were broken up. People in the Black Panther Party were so committed to the Black Panther Party that they were willing to go hide out and go somewhere and kind of vanish, leave their families at home so they can kind of continue the efforts of the Black Panther Party. But part of it was they knew that if they stayed at home, their family would get harassed, their children would get harassed, their wives would get harassed. So they were trying to find ways to kind of keep up the efforts of the Black Panther Party and protect people. But at the same time, they were forced kind of out of their homes out of a sense of kind of extreme commitment, right? But also fear that their families might be targeted if they were to stay connected to them. So what you see is the Black Panther Party that was protecting the Black community was starting to be compromised, right? Starting to be compromised. And so at the same time, you started seeing a lot of our Black leaders get taken out, right? Malcolm X is already dead. Martin Luther King is already dead. The Black Panther leaders are starting to be assassinated as well. And so now you have this community that was once powered by community activism, right? That is now no longer protected by that community activism because all of the leaders are being taken out. Everybody with me? Everybody with me? All right. So now we also see that there's this substance that's taking place in the mid-70s to the 80s that's also starting to take people out. When you do your research, you notice that a lot of the Black Panther parties, a lot of the key leaders or the key figures, they were all suffering or they all suffered from drug abuse, right? Because then they didn't know that crack cocaine, they didn't know heroin, they didn't know those things were as toxic as we know them to be now, right? So right now, weed is okay, right? In some spaces. Right now, weed is looked at as, hey man, this thing could possibly help you. You got anxiety, hey, just go get high, you'll be all right, right? You gotta be medical and all of that other stuff. But at some point, crack was looked at the same way. It wasn't as celebrated, but it was looked at something just like, hey, you just get you high, just kind of take the edge off, just help you relax a little bit. It's not that bad. But we didn't know the devastating effect that it could have over the course of time. So now you have the Black community is being destroyed. There is no leadership. Also at the same time, they're taking a lot of the trades out of the high schools. Back in the day, if you wanted to be a electrician, if you wanted to be a brick mason, if you wanted to be a auto mechanic, there were 7 trades that you could take in high school. So imagine you go to high school, right? By your sophomore year, you discover, you know what? I can go into plumbing or something like that. I don't know all the different trades, but you could have graduated high school and got a job, maybe probably making 30, 40 grand. Back then, that's a lot of money, right? You can start your career, you're an entrepreneur, make your own hours, so on and so forth. You might work for a company and make some money. Then you can have your own side hustle. So you can make a lot of money because you've got this skill. Well, all those jobs were being taken out of the high school. right? So now that brings us back to Ricky Ross. What inspires his necessity or need to jump into the drug game? Well, communities dilapidated, communities suffering, drugs has made an appearance, all the leaders are now gone, so who do we look to for guidance? The Black Panther Party is totally destroyed at this point, right? We're talking about the 80s. The Black Panther Party, everybody's starting to fold because they don't want the harassment from the FBI. You can't go to high school and get a trade like you used to, right? So you can't get a job, can't start working on my job skills so that I can hit the workforce and get going. College isn't what it is today. Some of you all probably thought, once I graduate high school, I'm going to college. It's not a question. That's the next step. Whether you play ball or you didn't play ball, many of you thought, you know what, my next step is I got to go to college, I got to get a degree. You know what I'm saying? Your brain didn't shut off after high school. Well, in this situation, your brain could shut off after high school because college just wasn't the end-all be-all in terms of making it in the world or even being able to provide for your family. But here, Rick Ross is like, well, what are my options? My neighborhood's destroyed. What am I supposed to do? Most criminals are smart individuals. What they do is they find a loophole in society and they optimize it. So they say, well, listen, man, if I can take a little bit of this, chop it up, expand it, sell it, make more money, go back to the supplier, get more work, sell it, get more work. If I'm disciplined with my money and I don't, if I'm disciplined with my money, I can turn this into a thing. Now, there's another thing that's kind of ironic, something that's kind of coincidental. America used to be allies with a Nicaraguan group, we'll just say a group, an international group. We used to be allies with an international group, right? We were supporting our allies in terms of basically funding their war, right? So here are our friends. Ty Black's an international, he's an international movement of some sort. He needs some help fighting this war, protecting himself and fighting for whatever he's fighting for. As an American, I say, you know what, bro? I'm gonna fund your war. You don't have to worry about anything. I'm gonna make sure you got all the guns and all the ammo and all the protection you can think of. But then Ty Black does something stupid. He does something so stupid that I have to distance myself from him and I say, listen, I can no longer support you in terms of finance, right? But what America said is, how about this? I won't finance your war, but this is what I will do. If you have a resource in your country, I'll allow you to sell it in America tax-free. All you gotta do is you can sell whatever you want, and whatever money you make from this resource, you can then fund your own war. How many of you know what that resource was? Yeah. D. Roger said. Right? So it was the drugs. So now, Rick Ross figures out this drug is here in America. I can capitalize on it. It's brand new, right? It's still relatively new. My community's suffering, but I can use this to now help myself out because I don't have any options really. My mother killed my brother because my brother poked my mother's eye out in a fight. I'm trying to help you understand where this brother's coming from. My mother killed my brother in front of me because my brother attacked my mother so much that he injured her eye. So what must his brother have been going through living in that time, right? That he lost his mind and went after his mother. How many of you guys got siblings? All right. What would happen if one of your siblings attacked your mother? Whoever that is going down, right? So imagine you grow up in this, and so now you're trying to figure out, how am I supposed to help my mother? How am I supposed to make things right? And sometimes when you want to make things right, you'll do whatever's necessary to make things right. Everybody with me? So we find drugs. So now, he finds a drug game, and inevitably he goes to jail twice, and he finds loophole in the law. He's free, but at this time he understands the error in his ways, and he makes right on everything. He works hard to make right on everything that he had done prior to going in. So now this brings us to forgiveness, right? This brings us to forgiveness, and what I have here is I have 4 different versions of forgiveness. 4 different versions of forgiveness, right? And I'll tell you how it connects to Rick Ross, because I'm going to ask you some questions in a little bit. So my first question, so the first kind of form of forgiveness is we got to ask for forgiveness, right? Everybody asked for forgiveness before? All right, maybe just me. All right, cool. All right. The second thing is we have to ask forgiveness. Well, how did I write that? Ask for forgiveness from others. So we have to ask for forgiveness from others. There's time when we have to ask forgiveness from God, and then sometimes we have to forgive ourselves. I want you to think about the Rick Ross narrative that I just painted for you, right? Hopefully, the way I told the story was kind of jumped around a little bit, but I want you to tell me, how do you see forgiveness playing out in Rick Ross's story? Who needs to be forgiven? Who needs to ask for forgiveness? Who needs to forgive themselves? Who needs to ask God for forgiveness? Who needs to be forgiven? In this narrative of Rick Ross, I want you to tell me, how do you see forgiveness playing out? I mean, there's an obvious one. There's an obvious one. I just told you a story about a drug dealer who just destroyed his community. Who needs? How do you see forgiveness playing out in that scenario?
Rick Ross asking forgiveness from others.
Yeah, Rick Ross needs to ask forgiveness from others, right? That's one level to it. That's one aspect, or one perspective. Any more? Ask forgiveness from God, 100%. Any more?
Ask to forgive himself.
Forgive himself. Forgive himself. You don't have to say any more. Forgive himself. Any more? You don't see any ways in which forgiveness can be exercised in that story. Gave you a lot of pieces.
You might have to forgive his brother for protecting his mom, or his mom.
Forgive his mom for protecting. Yeah. Forgive his, and you know what? When you have siblings, you may still be mad at your mother, right? In that situation, he may still be mad at his mother for what she did to him out of self-defense, and knowing that I know why you did what you had to do, but man, could you have shot him in the leg or something? Could you have shot him in the arm? It's real. It's real. I have somebody in my family where infidelity was a part of the marriage, and the kids were upset at one parent for wanting to leave the other, but they knew why she was leaving. I said, well, I kind of gave that one up. You dig what I'm saying? So here is, the kids know this is why the marriage is breaking up. We know why the marriage is breaking up, but we still mad at you because you want to leave this person. So sometimes even when we know why somebody might lash out, we can still be upset at that person for lashing out. Did anybody think of maybe our government needs to ask for Rick Ross's forgiveness? Anybody think about that? I mean, they allowed this substance to be brought into America, correct? They dropped it in his community, in his backyard. Up until this point, you don't hear about slaves doing coke, right? Anybody heard these stories about Harriet Tubman just getting busy? Nah. So the fact that this substance was allowed to come into our own backyard, and no one knew how toxic it was, or maybe they knew how toxic it was, because it's funny, it could have landed anywhere in the world. It could have landed, and it used to come over by ships. It could have landed anywhere in the world, but it came in the black community. Interesting. There's a lot of ways in which we can exercise forgiveness when we think about Rick Ross's story. Because